Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea and the U.S. agree to move ahead with the return of 12 American military bases to South Korean control. However, they still need to resolve the issue of who's going to pay to clean up the pollution at the sites. South Korea again reports almost 700 cases of COVID-19. It's the second highest number since the start of the pandemic, but the authorities are not yet ready to strengthen social distancing measures. And South Korea's exports so far this month are up almost 27% compared to last year, a sign that the global economy could be on the path to recovery. It's 5 o'clock p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The South Korean government says it's made progress with the U.S. on the return of installations and bases used by American forces stationed on the peninsula. After their initial agreement decades ago, there have been countless delays in their actual return. For more, we go to our Kim Ji-yeon at Seoul's Defense Ministry. Ji-yeon, what's the latest?
Well, Devin, the Office for Government Policy Coordination, along with the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Defense, says South Korea and the U.S. have agreed to the prompt return of a total of 12 U.S. military facilities to South Korea. This was at a video conference meeting held Friday at the 201st Joint Committee meeting on the Status of Forces Agreement. Those installations in Seoul alone include the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Far East District, Camp Kim, 2 parcels of the Yongsan Garrison, including the South Post, Niblo Barracks, Seobingo Compound, and the 8th Army Religious Retreat Center. The rest all in or near Yongsan-gu District. Locations other than Seoul include the Camp Walker Heliport in Daegu, the Seongnam Golf Course in Hanam, Gyeonggi-do Province, Camp Jackson and Uijeongbu, parts of Camp Mobile in Dongducheon, Commander Naval Forces of Korea Detachment in Pohang, and lastly, the Piercing Air Range in Taebaek, Gangwon-do Province. With this, 12 U.S. bases remain out of the 80 bases the U.S. has promised to return to South Korea. Devin.
Well, this is not the first time the U.S. has returned military bases to Korea. Late last year, the two sides reached a similar agreement to discuss how they're going to share the cost of decontaminating the bases. Has there been any progress on that front?
You're absolutely right. The two sides still seem to be in consultations regarding the decontamination issue, so it seems South Korea will be shouldering the cost until the two sides make progress in that front. Around this time last year, the U.S. had returned 4 bases. At the time, the Korean government has said there was a disagreement in determining which side is responsible for the cost of decontaminating the polluted parts of the 4 bases, estimated to cost more than $92 million US. An official from Seoul's Defense Ministry said future talks will go forward in establishing a mutually acceptable standard to the U.S.'s KISA principle, an acronym for the known imminent substantial endangerment to human health, for the U.S. to shoulder some of the costs. Despite the pandemic, the two sides have been conducting detailed environmental surveys since last December to determine the decontamination costs of the return bases. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Kim Ji-yeon, thank you for that report. Now, South Korea on Friday reported its second highest number of COVID-19 cases to date. No sign of any slowdown, though the authorities are adding more test centers in the capital area. Reportedly, they're not yet ready to announce stricter social distancing measures. Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea reported 689 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday, of which 673 were local transmissions. This is the second highest number of new cases reported by the country and the highest since the country entered a 3rd wave of infections. The capital region recorded more than 500 local transmissions, with Gyeonggi-do Province seeing its record number of new cases with 225. This 3rd wave, experts say, could be the biggest and the longest of the waves the country has endured so far. This is not just a problem for the capital region, but also a problem for the rest of the country too.
Looking at the recent spread of COVID-19, there is a pattern of spread across the nation through contact with friends and family in the capital region. In addition, the rise in cases outside the virus prevention areas is making it more difficult to stop the spread. In the end, to stop the spread, we must first seize victory against the virus in the capital area.
To achieve this, the government is setting up about 150 temporary screening centers in and around Seoul. It'll also call up additional manpower to run these.
In addition, we will make full epidemiological efforts by deploying 800 military and police personnel and training public service workers in the capital region.
Clusters from daily activities are increasing, with infections linked to a restaurant and singing class in Seoul topping 200. The city of Ulsan reported the most cases outside of the capital region with 47 after a major cluster in the city, which began at a middle school earlier this month and has spread to other schools in the area. Apart from clusters, the percentage of untraceable cases reached 20.5%, making the task even tougher for health authorities. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports in the first 10 days of this month were higher than they were a year ago, despite the fact that there was not yet a global pandemic last December. It's a sign that the global economy could be on the way to a recovery. PNG reports.
South Korea saw an increase in exports during the first 10 days of this month, despite the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Korea Customs Service on Friday, the country's exports from December 1st to December 10th amounted to some $16.3 billion, up 26.9% compared to the same period last year. The increase was mainly due to semiconductor exports, which were up 52.1% on year. Wireless communication devices also showed a strong performance, increasing 59.6% on year. And shipments of cars and car components were up by 34% and 22.4% respectively. But exports of petroleum products were down by more than 30% due to a plunge in global oil prices. Exports to the US, EU, and China saw the largest jumps, whereas shipments to the Middle East and Singapore fell. The daily average exports, which takes working days into account, also increased by 11.9% on year. The strong export figures raised hopes of an economic recovery as monthly exports had fallen for 6 straight months, from March to August. The nation then saw an increase of 7.6% on year in September, but slipped again in October before a slight increase again in November. If December's figures remain strong for the rest of the month, that would give South Korea 2 consecutive months of an on-year export growth. Peunji, Arirang News.
The European Central Bank has announced new stimulus measures to tide over European economies through the vaccine rollout. It's also facing the prospect of a no-deal Brexit in the coming days. PM Chung reports.
The European Central Bank on Thursday decided to keep its interest rate benchmarks unchanged at historic lows to stimulate economic activity amid the worsening COVID-19 crisis. In a move to encourage banks to lend money rather than hold onto it, the ECB decided to leave its benchmark interest rates unchanged at 0%, while holding its deposit rate at minus 0.5%.
The Governing Council decided to keep the key ECB interest rates unchanged. We expect them to remain at their present or lower levels until we have seen the inflation outlook robustly converge to a level sufficiently close to, but below 2%, within our projection horizon.
The central bank also decided to inject another 500 billion euros or 606 billion US dollars into its pandemic emergency purchase program in a bid to limit the economic damage caused by COVID-19.
We decided to increase the envelope of the pandemic emergency purchase program, PEP, by 500 billion euros, bringing it to a total of 1,850 billion euros.
The additional stimulus aims to financially support consumers and help businesses and governments survive until enough vaccines are rolled out to ease the pandemic. The president of the ECB, however, warned that the Eurozone is still facing a high amount of uncertainty as the distribution of vaccines will take months to inoculate the larger population. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Friday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks in New York were mixed on Thursday. COVID-19 continues to surge in the U.S., but as we just heard, the ECB unveiling more stimulus. Shares in the energy sector doing well in particular. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, the oil sector did quite well as the oil price continued to advance to the highest level since March. If you look at the oil price, it's at now $47 per barrel. And this is because of the continued improvement in terms of the vaccine implications in U.S. as well as Europe. The Pfizer and the BioNTech COVID vaccines will be used for the emergency use, and FDA are authorizing this. And if this continues to happen, then economic recovery can happen quite soon, and everybody's looking into that, and that is resulting into oil price rise. However, though, there's some pressure on the prices as the EIA data showing that a surprise increase in the U.S. crude inventories of 15.189 million barrels last week, which is the largest increase since the record seen in the April. So all these numbers are putting some pressures, and that's the reasons why the oil prices might not go up continuously. And if that's the case, then we will see some of the corrections in the futures. However, though, if you look at the overall markets continue to show rising trend because of the vaccine event, and if the vaccine comes through, then there will be economic recovery coming through in the future, and that would have some of the equity market to show further rise in the future.
Well, in Korea today, stocks are quite a bit higher and actually reaching a new all-time high. It overtook the intraday high set just yesterday. Tell us about the trade here in Seoul.
Yes, as you said, Kospi have recovered quite nicely after the quadruple witching day of yesterday. If you look at the Kospi, it was up close to 0.8%. Kosdaq is also up about 0.7%. If you look at the overall Kospi level, it continues to break the record high level. And the reason for that is because economic recovery will be coming through for Korea, particularly on the manufacturing side and export side. If you look at the export numbers, it continues to show rising trend, and the manufacturing numbers, the PMI numbers, are showing all improvement. If that continues, then as one of the most competitive manufacturing countries in the world, we think that Kospi will continue to do nicely in the future. We expect the Kospi to break above 3,000 level within the next 6 to 12 months, and it applies for the Kosdaq as well, as the Kosdaq continues to have quite significant volume related to the biosector, and biosector seems to be doing quite well as well.
And we've been watching exports, of course, as an indicator of the state of the global economy. So far in December, exports are up compared to a year earlier, about 27%. Big increases in shipments of memory chips and automobiles. What do you make of these figures, Mr. Yu?
Right. If you look at the export numbers, it continues to show quite a bit of improvement. For the first 10 days of December, it has risen by 26.9%, and that is quite significant increase. The shipment stood at 16.3 billion in December 1 to December 10th period, compared to 12.9 billion a year earlier, according to the data coming from the Korea Customer Service. If you look at the numbers, the memory chips are showing the biggest improvement, rising by 52.1%, and automobile related is also up by 22.4%. Particularly these two major sectors are showing significant improvement, and that is the key factors driving the export improvement. We think that this kind of improvement will continue for the rest of the year, as well as in the next year. As the cycle-wise, the chip cycle are looking very good. We expect the chip demand will rise quite significantly in the first half, maybe into the even 2023, 22 as well. So this kind of trend continues, then we think that the export number will look good, and this will have a better economic growth numbers. If all that means, then that is positive news for the equity market over the next 6 to 12 months.
All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
The South Korean government will aim to supply a total of 2.4 million public rental homes by 2025 to make sure everyone has stable housing, especially vulnerable groups, as home prices continue to soar. That's according to President Moon Jae-in, who made an on-site inspection Friday of a public rental housing complex in Gyeonggi-do province.
공공임대주택의 질적 혁신을 이루겠습니다. 누구나 살고 싶은 공공임대주택을 건설하겠습니다. 예년부터 공공임대주택 입주 요건을 중산층까지 확대하고 2025년까지 중형 임대주택 6만 3천 호를 공급할 것입니다.
President Moon noted that some people still face dire living conditions, so he said that the government will also make sure no one's left out by providing homes that are not only inexpensive but clean. He also vowed to step up housing subsidies and expand eligibility for them until there is sufficient supply. The top office explained that Friday's inspection reflects the government's resolve to improve public rental homes in terms of both quantity and quality. The city of Seoul is selling calendars again this holiday season, featuring the forms of the most physically sculpted firefighters in the city to raise money to treat burn victims. The city says since it started making the calendars in 2014 that it's sold more than 72,000 of them, raising over $600,000. The funds have been used to provide reconstructive surgery to a total of 160 patients with severe burns. Those who have benefited from the funds are giving back by offering counseling and sending calligraphy letters to comfort other patients. The firefighter calendar for next year will be sold until January 19th, both online and offline. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.